Greg, thanks for joining us on short notice. How are you?
I'm well, Dan. Good to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I've been talking about this the last 2 days now on the show of is there a way to extrapolate and maybe we make it a 8-team playoff? And then how do we get through all of the hurdles here? What do you think of the possibility of that happening where we go from 4 to 8, and how could you see that actually working?
It is the most frequently asked question of me during my now 4 football seasons as a conference commissioner. So understand that topic, in my view, will never go away. Mm-hmm. It has not been the subject of planning, strategizing, here's where we go, among the commissioners who lead. I'll just go back in my history. I was commissioner at the 1AA level, and you saw migration steadily from 4 to 8 to 16 to 24. So I think there will always be pressure on increasing the number, but there has to be a balance of that conversation. Right now, the feeling is we've struck that balance with the knowledge that there's always going to be tension around who is in and who is left out.
But if I had 8 teams, let's say all 5 of the power conferences are represented, and then I had 3 at large after that. I don't want to add more games, and I don't know if we can get around the conference championship game, or if you have that. I just think this weekend would be unbelievable if you started the playoffs this weekend, and you had, right, 8 versus 1. You had Notre Dame against Ohio State. Like, I think college football is missing out on storylines, Greg. I just do.
We have marvelous storylines. In fact, some of the storylines I wish I could just not pay attention to. But let's just go back substantively.
Okay.
From the Southeastern Conference perspective, we were the first to have a conference championship game. Ours is 1 versus 4. That's not an infrequent high-level game for us. We think it's special, and it becomes the issue of what is the give. Where do you give? Where do you yield? And I was not in the commissioner's chair when the college football playoff was created, but the reality that we have to acknowledge is many of my universities go right into final exams next week. We still have a bowl system that, from our perspective, works. It's evolving. We work to conclude things prior to the start of the spring semester so that Monday championship game date is intentional. We also have dynamics with holidays and NFL games. And could something someday fit? Sure. But the discussion of what's the give? What do we give up? Do we give up a regular season game to accommodate 4 more teams? That seems unwise for what college football means to our campuses and our communities, and frankly to the participants, because our student athletes were clear they'd rather play 12 than 11 when we went to the standard season. So it is. There's more complexity. There are more pieces to that conversation than maybe a parent would just go to 8. And I'll tell you, if you ever went to 8. The next question is, when are you going to go to 6?
I know that.
Every bracket exists. That's why we're in a startup of 4 that's worked pretty well.
But, Commissioner, it feels like money trumps everything here, whether we admit to it or not. The bottom line, everybody, it feels like that we're increasing the number of teams that can make the playoffs or do make the playoffs. Whereas college football, what do you have? 3% of the teams are going to make a playoff. The NFL has 37% of those teams making the playoffs. And I know you're going to say, well, we have bowl games. Okay, those are nice. But these other leagues, these other sports, you actually get a chance to play for a championship. You only have 4 schools to get a chance to play.
Yeah, and it puts great rate on the regular season. So I won't say we just have bowl games. How about that deal? I will say that some of those NFL teams run into the playoffs with 9-7 records, 8-8 records.
Yeah.
When you walk through my football season this year, the SEC, for the first time in college football playoff history, is a conference with 8 teams in the top 25. There's a rigor in our schedule. There's an intensity around our competition that sometimes boils over, but I think that provides those storylines in great meaning. Even into early November, where people still have opportunities perhaps to move up. One of the oddities that we're dealing with, in fact, I was fully prepared for this question, so I'll just tee it up, is you see just repeats. Alabama's been in this position each year of the playoff. Clemson's moved into that position. And does that circumstance cause people to view things differently? That's one of those rhetorical questions I ask myself, but we ought to think about something like that.
But if I showed you data where the fans wanted this, let's say 80% of the fans say, let's have 8-team playoff. Does that matter at all to you as a commissioner?
Well, I think about that, but that's not the only deciding factor. So earlier it was, if it was about the money, well, if it was about the money, just maybe expand and figure out how much money's there. It is, though, about college football being special. We have a unique approach. I think these conference championship games provide storylines, even if it's not a 1-4 matchup. You have Texas and Oklahoma playing. You have Northwestern playing for a Big Ten championship game. And the amount of attention on college football this weekend is increased because of conference championship games. Your follow-up will be, but wouldn't it even be greater? Well, now you say, let's give AQs to 5 conference champions. When we were creating things, we had some teams, and some of those are that way this year, that some teams in conference championship games aren't ranked. Let's just put it there. Are we going to put an unranked team that happens to win a conference championship game automatically into the playoff? That's a very different approach than we have with the 4 best teams as established right now.
Well, it took a long time for me to convince all of these coaches that, the BCS is nice, but if you go to 4 teams, it could be nicer. So, Notre Dame would be out. They'd be undefeated, and they would be out like Auburn was, a decade and a half ago.
Right.
So we got to 4 when nobody wanted to go to 4. And I remember all of these coaches I'd talk to and say, let's change the BCS. Now, it'd be Clemson and Alabama, but there'd be no drama to the college football season. Like, I want to add a little bit more drama to this. Maybe it ends up Clemson and Alabama. But you can own December, I believe.
And that may be true. I would counter, though, there's an incredible level of drama around college football now. And you can imagine I live in my own world, so maybe outside the 11 states of the SEC, the drama is at a different level. And I say that with a smile and great affection for the intensity. What might change? I don't think we've ever seen circumstances where, boom, you just change a bracket and there's no other dominoes that follow. And so we go back to principles that I talked about, that whether one wants to be cynical or not were important. We honor the ability for conferences to schedule differently. So that's a point of controversy now. We want the playoff completed before the spring academic semester starts. We honor the conference championship games. We do provide a break in December, and a piece of that is intentional because we do have young men who are graduating, and we have young men who have final exams to take. I also, from my past life, watched both the physical and the personnel toll on just adding games. And that goes back to watching a 16-team playoff format. And I am sensitive to not magnifying that dynamic, because the physical intensity around Southeastern Conference football is significant, and adding to that in December is one we ought to think about carefully before just.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't want to be adding games, but if you can have 9 conference games for everybody. I mean, there was a point though, Greg, when you didn't have all the conferences have a conference title game. Like it's constantly moving, it feels like. And I think in 5 years from now, if we have a conversation, I think we're having a different conversation. But I do understand a lot of the things that you're pointing out. I just think if you look at the hypothetical to it, I think the possibilities are a lot of fun. I don't want to get to 16. I don't want to go there. I don't want to get to 12. But I do want to give, like, Central Florida deserved to at least be in the conversation last year. I thought that they were a very good team, and maybe this year as well. But to have that possibility That's what you want in all sports, is the possibility. That's why we love March Madness, and you don't have that with college football. That's what I would like to see. 8 teams, maybe you get an at-large where a Boise State years ago or Central Florida. That's what I would like to have. I'd like to have a little bit more of that and have these storylines, and maybe it comes down to Alabama and Clemson for the national title, and it probably will.
And the good news is there are thoughtful people involved in the conversation, and you kind of put a milestone out there, which was Auburn's undefeated season, and I'm not looking at the calendar, I think in 2004.
Yeah.
It was another 10 years before there was the kind of change that was pursued in the aftermath of that circumstance. So in real time, it seems the pace of consideration may be slow. There are reasons, and I think still good reasons, to remain at 4. But, the future's the future. And right now, I was pleased to see 2 SEC teams ranked in those top 4.
If Nick Saban calls you right now, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's fine. I've talked to him with some regularity, not frequency. And those are always pretty straightforward conversations, whether I'm delivering a message or he is. And with all of my coaches, I talked to 3 yesterday, have had positive relationships and conversations. Always good.
If you could go to one SEC tailgate, and you got to be honest, Greg.
Yeah. It would be an Ole Miss, Oxford.
Oh, that's the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's like low-hanging fruit, right? Now, if you ask me, like, where game venue in Baton Rouge, the Alabama-LSU game this year was incredible.
Well, the atmosphere was. The game wasn't.
If you're a football tactician, it's fascinating.
Ole Miss, by the way, never loses a tailgate. That's the one thing that they go undefeated in.
Yeah, they're pretty good in a lot of things, but you asked, so we've got a lot of special places. So before I get myself in too much trouble, I have 14 favorite tailgates.
Of course you do. Thanks for joining us, Greg. We appreciate your time, and have fun this weekend.
Yeah, appreciate the invitation. It'll be a great day on Saturday.
That's Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.